Hey guys, Miss Kellogg here with your Unit 7.01 read along. The Renaissance represents the magnificent cultural rebirth of creativity, artistry, and intellectualism that spreads throughout Europe from the 14th and 17th centuries. Scholars and artists made astonishing discoveries in science, mathematics, literature, politics, and art. The 1,000 years leading up to the Renaissance are called the Middle Ages, the period that marked the end of the Roman Empire and the rise of Christianity in Europe. During the Middle Ages, Christianity spread through Europe and influenced art and architecture. Times were difficult, but artists and architects created many inspirational works. Here we have this Bayeux tapestry created in the 11th century. And then you have your review for your lesson guide. Celtic, Byzantine, and Romanesque art. As you read through the lesson, use the student guide to take notes about each screen. You may also use to make sketches and take other notes. The early Middle Ages. The Middle Ages in Europe lasted nearly 1,000 years, from about 500 to 1400. Much of the art and architecture created during this time had a single purpose: to serve Christianity. Many groups of people lived in Europe during the early Middle Ages. Celtic society originated in Ireland in Christian monasteries. There became academic centers of learning and culture. The Byzantine Empire, centered in Greece, spread through into Europe and carried Christianity with it. The Romanesque period in Western Europe marked an architectural movement known for the monumental cathedrals that housed Christian art and whose design was influenced by Roman architecture. Invasions by Germanic tribes brought the fall of the Roman Empire, and the Western Europe was divided among the war factions. Later in the Viking wreaked havoc in the regions, and people lived in constant fear and attack. Concerned foremost with survival, people had little formal education. Learning was kept alive in the Christian monasteries by monks living secluded lives of prayer and service. That God, Christianity was one of the unifying factors during the Middle Ages that gave people hope during dark days. Monasteries were the religious, artistic, and cultural centers of Celtic life. Talented monks and nuns produced beautiful tapestries, metalwork, and paintings. Monks collected and preserved important manuscripts about medicine, astronomy, law, and religion. Celtic monks spent years copying sacred texts, since the manuscripts represented the Word of God and were meant for God's eyes. Only the most beautiful, intricate work would do. The monks used quills to create calligraph lettering and fine brushes and jeweled tone paints that painstakingly illustrate the manuscripts with elaborate designs. The monks encouraged gold and silver book coverings with gems. The texts the monks created are called illuminated manuscripts. One of the most brilliant illuminated manuscripts is the Book of Kells, which contains the 4 Gospels of the Bible: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Many scholars believe Celtic monks from Scotland brought the manuscripts to Ireland while fleeing the Viking raid in a secluded monastery. In Kells, Ireland, monks safeguarded the Book of Kells for hundreds of years. Chirolota is the opening page for Matthew's Gospel in the Book of Kells. Chirolota is the first 3 letters of the Greek word for Christ. On the page, chi is written as an X, rho as a P, and iota as an I. The curly X nearly fills the page. Under the X, the P and the I intertwine at the very bottom of the page. The Latin word generatio means the birth, referring to the birth of Christ. Celtic illuminators used the interlacing style for the decoration, in which designs twist and weave around one another. Overlapping ribbons form bodies of animals and people. Interlaced spirals, knots, lines, curls, and maze form interesting visual rhythms. Hidden within the interlacing illuminators include animals and figures that symbolize Christian ideas. In the early 4th century, the Roman Empire's first Christian ruler, Constantine, moved his capital from Rome to Byzantium in the eastern part of the empire. From there, the great Byzantine Empire grew. After Constantine's death, the city was renamed Constantinople in his honor. The Byzantine Empire reached its zenith under Emperor Justinian, whose help spread Christianity and commissioned magnificent churches such as the Church of St. Apollinare in Classe of Ravenna, Italy. Stunning mosaics covered the walls of the nave and the semicircular apse in the end of the nave. An elaborate mosaic decoration, the apse of the Church of St. Apollinare in Classe, depicting the death of Christ, and martyrdom of St. Apollonius to suggest the form of figures, plants, and animals. Artists create flat shapes without shading. They kept each element separate. Objects rarely overlapped or touched. Artists used gold for the sky. Those techniques let the artist focus on Christian symbolism instead of depicting the real earthly existence. Art helped the illiterate church population understand Christian teachings through pictures rather than words. You can explore it on the next screen. You can scroll through and look. Imagine arranging small pieces of colored glass or tesserae on wet plaster to make a picture that covers an entire wall or ceiling. That's what Byzantine mosaic artists did when they created mosaics on church walls and ceilings. To make gold tesserae art, artists covered tiny pieces of glass with thin sheets of gold leaf. Sunlight flooding through the church windows made the mosaic sparkle, and the glass and the gold enhanced the spiritual imagery of the mosaic. Unlike the Romans, who put mosaics on the floor, the Byzantines considered mosaics with Christian theme too holy to walk on, as they placed them high up on the walls and ceilings. Icons in Greek word for image. Icon paintings of Jesus, the Virgin Mary, or Christian saints gained popularity during the early years of the Byzantine Empire. People looked at icons while they prayed or meditated. Byzantine artists used a special paint called egg tempera for icon paintings and gave the paintings a beautiful luster. To make the paint, they ground minerals to a fine dust and mixed them with egg yolk. The yolk gave the painting a beautiful sheen that would not exist if the minerals were mixed with water. Byzantine artists made icons using their media as well. They fashioned small, delicate icons from enamel, precious metals, and gemstones. Then incorporated icons into lavish mosaics mounted on church walls. The common thread of icon art was the image that honored holy figures such as Mary or Jesus. The painting Madonna and Child on a curved throne has characteristics of Byzantine icons. The artist focused on the symbolism and religious messages of Christian imagery, setting the figures against a heavenly golden background rather than portraying lifelike figures in an earthly setting. He used subtle shading on the faces and hands of figures to suggest form, but stylized their clothing with angular folds highlighted with golden lines. The artist painted a tender yet serious scene with the Virgin Mary tilting her head slightly, gazing towards her son, while Jesus looks at the viewer and gives a traditional blessing sign with 2 fingers. Jesus appears as a small version of an adult, and 2 angels hover over the figures. In the 10th century, Western Europe was an angular feud society. Powerful barons, princes and dukes called lords, owned parcels and land. They ruled the kingdoms. Peasants and serfs burned in the fields in exchange for protection by the lord of their manor and his knights. The bond that united people was the Christian church. During the 11th and 12th centuries, architects designed magnificent cathedrals that were presided over by a high-ranking priest called a bishop. The cathedrals looked like fortresses, with thick walls that supported heavy roofs. In fact, people could take refuge in a cathedral when they were threatened with an attack. The architectural style of the cathedral built during the period is called Romanesque, referring to Roman elements that they incorporated, such as rounded arches. The bishop in Autun, France, enlisted architects to design the Romanesque Cathedral of Saint Lazare. Pilgrims journeyed from faraway lands to worship there and view the relics of Saint Lazarus that were purposely housed inside the cathedral. Romanesque cathedrals vary in design according to region, but they all share some common features. Arcading or rows of arches in a main decorative feature of the exterior of Romanesque cathedral. A tower that emphasizes the church's significance in the community is another. The exterior of Saint Lazare was altered during different periods of construction, but the west portal retains the original Romanesque design. The west portal is the main entryway of Saint Lazare. The sculptor Giuseppe carved the relief. Giuseppe, like other Romanesque sculptors, placed the most important Christian imagery in his tympanum, the semicircular area above the door formed by the rounded curve of the arch. The tympanum depicts the Last Judgment when Jesus decides the fate of human souls. Clergy believe that the tympanum's message would inspire worshippers to follow the teachings of the Bible or face the horrible fate of the sinners that are depicted. The carved relief depicts souls lining up for judgment. In the archivolts, the curved banding of the echoes of the tympanum, Giuseppe carved the signs of the zodiac and traditional labors of the years in rounded stone medallions. And that is the end of 7.01.